They say he was the perfect prince, until he wasn't. Silver hair flowing like molten moonlight, a voice that could make the hardest men weep, a warrior forged not by birth, but by will, beloved by the realm, destined for greatness, the hope of an entire dynasty resting on his shoulders. And then he destroyed it all. A crown of winter roses, placed in the wrong woman's lap, one single moment that would ignite a rebellion, a choice that would drown the 7 kingdoms in blood. Picture a prince who abandoned his wife and children to hide with another woman, while his father burned noble lords alive. 3 of the finest knights in history standing guard at a remote tower, not protecting their king, not crowning a new one, but defending something else, something secret, something that would change everything. Imagine the greatest warrior of his generation, Robert Baratheon, wading through a blood-red river, hunting the man who stole his betrothed. The clash of steel, the crushing of armor, rubies scattering like drops of dragon blood into crimson water. Was Rhaegar Targaryen a tragic hero following destiny, or a selfish fool who dressed his desires in prophecy? Did the woman go willingly, or was she taken? Was it love, or was it madness? The answers died with him at the Trident, but the consequences, they echo through every war, every death, every revelation in the Game of Thrones. Tonight, we unravel the complete story of the prince who started a war, the man whose choices shaped everything you know about Westeros, the father of the greatest secret in the 7 kingdoms. Hey everyone, tonight we begin with the rise and catastrophic fall of Rhaegar Targaryen, the Dragon Prince, whose single decision set the entire realm ablaze. From prophecy-obsessed scholar to tournament champion, from dutiful husband to controversial lover, his story is one of destiny, tragedy, and questions that still haunt the 7 kingdoms. So, before you settle in, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy deep dives into Game of Thrones lore. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable under your blanket, and let's journey back to the day a dragon was born in flames. The year was 259. After the conquest, the place was Summerhall, the royal palace in the Stormlands, where Targaryen kings spent their summers dreaming of past glories. King Aegon V, known as Aegon the Delightly, had spent decades obsessing over a singular, impossible goal. For more than a century, dragons had been extinct. The great beasts that had conquered Westeros, that had made House Targaryen gods among men, were nothing but bones and legends. Aegon wanted to bring them back. On this particular day, something was supposed to happen, something magical. Ancient texts had been studied, prophecies had been interpreted, preparations had been made in secret. The king believed he had found the way. Today, dragons would return to the world. Instead, Summerhall burned. The details remain shrouded in mystery and ash. Perhaps it was wildfire, the volatile substance Targaryens loved and feared. Perhaps it was a ritual gone catastrophically wrong. Perhaps the gods themselves rejected the attempt. Whatever the cause, the palace erupted in flames that could be seen for miles. King Aegon V died in the inferno. His son, Prince Duncan, died trying to save him. The Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Ser Duncan the Tall, perished in the flames. Countless others burned alive as the summer palace collapsed into a pyre of ambition and failure. But on that same day, as smoke choked the sky and screams filled the air, a child was born. Princess Rhaegar Targaryen, wife to Prince Aerys, went into labor amidst the chaos. While her father-in-law burned to death, while the palace crumbled around her, while the dynasty teetered on the edge of extinction, she brought forth a son. They named him Rhaegar. Born in grief, born in flames, born as dragons, failed to rise. The shadow of Summerhall would hang over him for his entire life. Those who survived whispered that his birth had meaning, that the gods took so many lives that day, but gave this one child in return, that perhaps the price for his life was measured in all those deaths. From his earliest years, Rhaegar was different. While other noble children played at knights and ladies, he sat in the library at King's Landing, reading histories that children should find impossibly dull. While his father Aerys still retained his sanity and his throne, young Rhaegar remained melancholic, quiet, lost in thoughts too heavy for a child's shoulders. His grandmother, Queen Rhaegar, who had survived Summerhall, sometimes watched him with sadness in her eyes. She saw the weight he carried, though he was too young to understand it himself. Born the same day his grandfather died trying to hatch dragons. Born into a dynasty clinging desperately to faded glory. But then, something changed. When Rhaegar was still a boy, perhaps 10 or 11 years old, he discovered something in those dusty books, something that altered him completely. He never told anyone exactly what he read, but after that day, the melancholic bookish prince transformed himself. He went to the master-at-arms and declared, with absolute certainty in his young voice, "It seems I must be a warrior." And so began the forging of the perfect prince. The prince who would one day place a crown of blue roses in the wrong woman's lap. The prince who would die in a red river with Robert Baratheon standing over his body. The prince born in flames, destined to burn the realm. From the moment Rhaegar decided he must become a warrior, everything changed. This was not a boy playing at swords. This was something different, something almost frightening in its intensity. He trained relentlessly. Every dawn found him in the training yard before the masters-at-arms had even arrived. While other noble children were still warm in their beds, Rhaegar was drilling footwork, perfecting strikes, building the strength his scholarly frame had never possessed. He attacked the transformation with the same methodical dedication he had once applied to dusty prophecies and ancient texts. The thing is, Rhaegar was not a natural warrior. Not like Robert Baratheon, who seemed born with a warhammer in his hands and battle fury in his blood. Not like Arthur Dayne, who moved with a sword as if it were an extension of his own body. Rhaegar had to forge every skill through pure discipline and will. He made himself into something he was not meant to be, and that made it all the more impressive. By the time he reached manhood, Rhaegar Targaryen had become genuinely formidable. He won tourney after tourney, not through raw power, but through precision, technique, and an almost unsettling focus. When he rode in the lists, crowned in silver hair and dark armor, the crowds roared. Here was their prince, their hope, the perfect heir to a dynasty desperately needing redemption. But understanding Rhaegar requires seeing beyond the armor and accolades. Physically, he was striking in that particular Targaryen way, tall and lean, with hair that seemed to shift between silver and gold depending on the light. His eyes were a deep purple, almost indigo, and they carried a sadness that never quite left, even when he smiled. Women said he was the most handsome man they had ever seen. Men said there was something haunting about him, as if he saw things the rest of them could not. His true gift, though, was music. While swords and lances won him tournament crowns, it was his harp that truly captured hearts. Rhaegar could play with such emotion, such aching beauty, that hardened knights found tears on their cheeks. When he sang, the entire hall fell silent. Not from obligation or courtesy, but because his voice carried something genuine, something that touched the deepest parts of the human heart. It was said his music could make you weep for loves you'd never had and homes you'd never seen. His personality matched his melancholy music. Rhaegar was courteous to everyone, noble and common alike. He spoke thoughtfully, never rashly. He listened more than he talked. When he gave his attention to someone, they felt truly seen, truly heard. The small folk adored him. The nobility respected him. Even in a realm full of ambitious and cruel lords, almost everyone agreed that Rhaegar represented the best of what a prince should be. Almost everyone. But there was something else beneath that perfect surface. A weight, an obsession. Those closest to him saw it in his distant stares, in the way he would sometimes stop mid-conversation, his eyes unfocused, as if listening to voices only he could hear. The prophecy he had read as a child never released its grip on him. He carried it like chains made of fate itself. His closest friend was Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, who wielded the legendary blade Dawn and was widely considered the finest knight in all of Westeros. Their friendship was deep and genuine. Arthur was one of the few people Rhaegar seemed to truly confide in, though even Arthur never learned everything that haunted his friend. Alongside Arthur stood Oswell Went, the quiet but deadly Kingsguard, and Gerald Hightower, the elderly Lord Commander who had served 3 kings and seen everything the realm could offer. Later, young Jaime Lannister would join the Kingsguard, and he worshipped Rhaegar with the intensity only a 15-year-old boy could muster. To Jaime, Rhaegar represented everything good and noble about knighthood, the perfect warrior poet, the hero from the songs made flesh. Barristan Selmy, already a legendary knight himself, served Rhaegar with devotion. He saw the prince's potential, his genuine nobility, and believed without question that Rhaegar would one day be a great king. They all believed in him, and that belief would destroy them. But while Rhaegar's reputation grew, another shadow lengthened. His father, King Aerys II, was descending into madness. What had started as paranoia and eccentricity was becoming something darker, something dangerous. Aerys began to see enemies everywhere. He trusted no one. His fascinations turned to fire and pain. He found pleasure in watching men burn. The incident at Duskendale had accelerated everything. When Aerys was briefly captured by a rebellious lord, something broke inside him. After his rescue, the paranoia became all-consuming. He stopped cutting his hair or nails. He refused to let blades near him. He grew gaunt and wild-eyed, more creature than king, and he started burning people alive for imagined slights and invented treasons. The realm watched in horror as their king transformed into a monster, and they looked to Rhaegar with desperate hope. Whispers started in taverns and great halls alike. Rhaegar would be a better king. Rhaegar would fix everything. Rhaegar would save them. This put the prince in an impossible position. He loved his father, or at least loved who his father had been, but he also saw what Aerys was becoming. He understood that his father's reign was destroying the Targaryen name, undoing everything his ancestors had built. The tension between them grew. Aerys, in his paranoid state, became jealous of his son's popularity. He made cruel comments. He humiliated Rhaegar. In small ways, the relationship curdled. And through all of this, Rhaegar remained focused on the prophecy. Whatever he had read in those ancient texts consumed him. He spoke of it in cryptic terms. The dragon must have 3 heads, he said, referencing some ancient Targaryen belief. 3 heads, 3 children, 3 heroes to face some unnamed darkness. His marriage to Elia Martell came in 280. After the conquest, a political alliance that brought Dawn firmly into the Targaryen fold. Elia was everything a princess should be. Delicate in health but strong in spirit. Intelligent, cultured, she brought the sophistication of Dawn to the court, with its poetry and passion, its different way of seeing the world. Rhaegar tried to be a good husband. By all accounts he was respectful, dutiful, kind. But there was no great passion there, no overwhelming love. It was a political marriage, and both of them understood that. They made the best of it. When Princess Rhaenys was born in 280, Rhaegar held his daughter and said something strange. The dragon must have 3 heads, Not words of love or joy, words of prophecy. Already he was counting. Already he was planning for something larger than his family, larger than his marriage, larger than his duty. 2 years later, Prince Aegon arrived. The birth nearly killed Elia. The Maesters were blunt in their assessment. She could have no more children. Any further pregnancy would be fatal. The princess had done her duty, given the realm 2 Targaryen heirs, but her childbearing days were finished. Rhaegar named his son Aegon, after the conqueror, after all the great Targaryen kings, and when he looked at the baby boy, he said something that no one quite understood at the time. His is the song of ice and fire. Ice and fire. The Targaryen words were fire and blood. Fire, they understood. But ice, what did that mean? Why would a Targaryen prince speak of ice? And there was the problem. Rhaegar had 2 children. The prophecy demanded 3. Elia could provide no more. The equation seemed impossible to solve. Unless he looked elsewhere. This is where the story gets complicated, where the perfect prince began making choices that would doom everything. Because prophecy is a dangerous master. It convinces you that the ends justify any means, that your destiny is more important than your duty, that you can see what others cannot, so normal rules do not apply to you. Rhaegar believed he knew something no one else did. He believed the long night was returning, that an ancient darkness would consume the world unless the right heroes rose to face it. He believed his children were meant to be those heroes, and he believed with absolute certainty that he needed a 3rd child. The weight of the world was on his shoulders, or so he thought, and that weight would crush everything he touched. The year 281 arrived with an announcement that shocked the realm. Lord Walter Wente, a minor lord holding the cursed ruins of Harrenhal, declared he would host the greatest tournament in living memory. The prize purses were astronomical. Knights from every corner of Westeros would compete. It would be a spectacle unlike anything seen in generations, which immediately raised questions. Harrenhal was the largest castle ever built in Westeros, but it was also famously cursed and half-ruined. The Wents were not a particularly wealthy house. Where exactly did Lord Went get the resources to host such an extravagant event? The answer, many believe, was standing right beside him. Evidence suggests that Rhaegar Targaryen himself orchestrated the tournament, using Went as a front. The prince had been quietly gathering support among various lords, men who shared his concerns about King Aerys's increasing madness. The tournament was meant to be cover for something far more important than jousting, a secret council. A gathering where powerful nobles could discuss what everyone was thinking but no one dared say out loud. Aerys needed to be removed from power, peacefully if possible, and Rhaegar would take the throne. It was a brilliant plan. Thousands would attend. In the chaos and celebration, key lords could meet in private without arousing suspicion. Arthur Dayne knew. Select members of the Kingsguard knew. Certain lords had been approached carefully, tested for their loyalty and discretion. Everything was in place. Then Aerys announced he would attend. The king had not left King's Landing in years. His paranoia kept him locked in the Red Keep, surrounded by his pyromancers and his wildfire, trusting no one. But Varys, the master of whisperers, had caught wind of something. He whispered into the king's ear, and Aerys decided to travel to Harrenhal himself, bringing his entourage, his guards, his suspicion. The secret council never happened. Rhaegar's one chance to save the realm peacefully evaporated. He would have to find another way. But first there was a tournament to attend, and appearances to maintain. Harrenhal filled with the greatest names in Westeros. Aerys arrived looking like something from a nightmare, with hair down to his waist, yellowed nails like claws, and eyes that darted constantly, searching for enemies that existed only in his mind. Queen Rhaella came with bruises on her arms that everyone pretended not to see. The king's madness had turned violent in private as well as public. Princess Lyanna attended, heavily pregnant with Aegon, beautiful in her Dornish silks and jewels. She sat in the place of honor, every bit the dignified princess, though the pregnancy had weakened her already delicate constitution. Brandon Stark was there, the eldest son of Lord Rhaegar Stark, tall, handsome, bold to the point of recklessness. He was a natural warrior, quick to laugh and quick to anger. His younger brother Eddard, called Ned, was quieter, more thoughtful, but you could see the strength in him too. And then there was Robert Baratheon. Even then, before he was king, Robert was a force of nature, massive in build, powerful beyond measure, with a booming laugh that filled any hall. He was betrothed to Brandon's sister, Lyanna Stark, and he was already deeply drunk by the second day of the tournament. Robert loved three things above all else: fighting, drinking, and women, not necessarily in that order. Lyanna Stark herself was perhaps 14 or 15 years old, but already there was something striking about her. She had that particular northern beauty, dark-haired and gray-eyed, with a wildness about her that reminded people of wolves. She was called the She-Wolf of Winterfell, and the name fit. Lyanna had no patience for the simpering behavior expected of high-born ladies. She could ride as well as any man. She spoke her mind, and she was profoundly unhappy about her betrothal to Robert Baratheon. She had told her brother Ned about her doubts. Robert already had a bastard daughter, and his reputation for visiting brothels was well known even then. Lyanna understood what her future held. She would be Robert's proper wife, giving him legitimate heirs, while he continued bedding every serving girl and tavern woman who caught his eye. "Love is sweet, dearest Ned," she had said, "but it cannot change a man's nature." But weddings were political arrangements, not matters of personal preference. The match would unite the Stormlands and the North. It would give Robert the Stark alliance. Lyanna's feelings were irrelevant. Also present was young Jaime Lannister, newly appointed to the Kingsguard at just 15 years old. The appointment had shocked everyone. Jaime was the heir to Casterly Rock, the eldest son of Tywin Lannister, the richest and most powerful lord in Westeros. By joining the Kingsguard, Jaime gave up all claims to land and titles. He could never marry, never have legitimate children, never inherit. Tywin had been furious. He resigned as Hand of the King immediately and returned to Casterly Rock. But Jaime did not care. He had joined the Kingsguard to be near Rhaegar, to serve the perfect prince, to be part of something noble and grand, and perhaps, though he would not admit it even to himself, to stay close to his twin sister Cersei, who had come to court hoping to marry Rhaegar before he wed Elia instead. Barristan Selmy was there, the legendary knight who had already lived through multiple reigns and seen everything Westeros had to offer, and dozens of other notable lords and knights, all gathered for what was meant to be the tournament of the century. But before the jousting began, something strange happened. A mystery knight appeared in mismatched armor, carrying a shield painted with a laughing weirwood tree. The knight was small in stature, and the armor fit poorly, clearly borrowed or stolen from multiple sources. No one knew who this mystery knight was, and the mystery knight refused to give a name. The Knight of the Laughing Tree entered the lists and proceeded to defeat 3 knights in succession. After each victory, instead of claiming ransom or prizes, the mystery knight made the same demand: teach your squires honor. Teach them to respect all people, not just the highborn. It was an unusual request, and it made more sense when people learned the context. The 3 knights had all allowed their squires to mock and abuse a small crannogman named Howland Reed. Reed was from the Neck, from the swamps and bogs where the trees grew thick, and the people were small and strange. The squires had thought it fine entertainment to torment this odd little man, until someone intervened, until someone decided that honor mattered, even for a crannogman. After the 3rd victory, the Knight of the Laughing Tree vanished. King Aerys became obsessed with finding the Mystery Knight's identity. In his paranoid mind, this was clearly an enemy, someone mocking him, plotting against him. He ordered the knight found and unmasked immediately. He sent Rhaegar himself to hunt down the Mystery Knight. Rhaegar rode out. He returned hours later and reported that the Mystery Knight was gone, vanished without a trace, and he had found only the abandoned shield. But many people believe Rhaegar did find the knight, that he discovered exactly who had worn that mismatched armor, and that the discovery changed everything. Because the evidence strongly suggests the Knight of the Laughing Tree was Lyanna Stark. She was known to be an excellent rider. She had the wild spirit to intervene when she saw injustice. She had befriended Howland Reed and would have wanted to defend him, and she had the skill to defeat 3 knights, especially if they were not taking the small Mystery Knight seriously. Did Rhaegar find her? Did they talk? Was that when something passed between them, some connection neither expected? Or had they already noticed each other before, and this merely confirmed what was building? We will never know for certain, but what came next shocked everyone. The jousting competition began in earnest. Rhaegar fought his way through the brackets methodically, precisely, with that same focused discipline that marked everything he did. He defeated knight after knight. He faced Brandon Stark and won. He tilted against Barristan Selmy and emerged victorious. In the final match he faced his own best friend Arthur Dayne, the greatest living knight, and somehow prevailed. The crowd roared. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, the perfect prince, the realm's hope, had won the tournament at Harrenhal. Now came the traditional moment. The champion would name a queen of love and beauty, placing a crown of flowers in some lady's lap. Everyone knew who he would choose. His wife, Princess Elia, sat in a place of honor, heavily pregnant with his child. She was the obvious choice, the correct choice. It would be a sweet gesture to his wife, a sign of respect and affection. Some thought he might choose Lyanna Stark as a diplomatic gesture. She was betrothed to Robert, and honoring her would honor the Starks and the Baratheons both. It would be slightly unconventional, but still acceptable. Rhaegar rode forward with a crown woven of blue winter roses, the pale blue flowers that grew in the glass gardens of Winterfell. He passed Princess Elia without a glance. He rode directly to where Lyanna Stark sat beside her brother, and he placed the crown of winter roses in her lap. The crowd went silent, completely, utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive tournament ground. Rhaegar had just publicly chosen another man's betrothed over his own pregnant wife, in front of thousands of witnesses, in front of his father, in front of Robert Baratheon and Brandon Stark, in front of Princess Elia's own brother, who had traveled all the way from Dorne to see his sister honored. Brandon Stark's hand went to his sword, his face flushed with fury. That was his baby sister being publicly honored in a way that suggested impropriety right in front of her betrothed. Robert Baratheon's drunken smile faded. Confusion crossed his face, then anger. What was happening? Why was the prince crowning his betrothed? Ned Stark looked horrified, understanding immediately how this would be interpreted. Princess Elia's face remained composed, but those close enough could see the tears gathering in her eyes. The public humiliation was total. Her husband, the father of her children, had just announced to the entire realm that he favored another woman. The Dornish lords in attendance were livid. This was an insult not just to Elia, but to all of Dorne. King Aerys watched with those mad eyes, calculating, suspicious, wondering what his son was planning. And Lyanna herself, the accounts differ. Some say she smiled, caught up in the romance and drama of it. Others say she looked uncomfortable, uncertain, understanding that something dangerous had just happened. The moment passed, the silence broke. People began talking, whispering. exclaiming. The tournament continued, but everything had changed. That crown of winter roses was a declaration, whether of love or obsession, of prophecy or passion. It announced to everyone that Rhaegar Targaryen wanted Lyanna Stark, and in that moment he planted the seeds that would grow into rebellion, into war, into the destruction of his entire family. The perfect prince had just made the first of his catastrophic choices. The tournament at Harrenhal ended, but its echoes continued. Gossip spread through the realm like wildfire. Speculation ran wild in every tavern and castle. What did it mean? Was the prince having an affair? Was it just a romantic gesture gone wrong? Had he lost his mind like his father? Rhaegar returned to King's Landing with Princess Elia. To all outward appearances, life continued normally. Elia gave birth to baby Aegon later that year or early the next. The birth was difficult, far more difficult than when Rhaenys had been born. Elia nearly died. The Maesters worked for hours to save her life. When it was over, when mother and child had both survived, the Maesters gave their assessment. Princess Elia could have no more children. Another pregnancy would kill her. Her body simply could not endure it again. Rhaegar held his newborn son and said something that confused everyone present. His is the song of ice and fire, not the song of fire and blood. The Targaryen words, not a traditional blessing or prophecy. Ice and fire, as if ice was equally important to fire. But Rhaegar had his son. He had 2 healthy children, a daughter and a son. The succession was secure. The dynasty would continue. What more could a prince want? Except Rhaegar had said it before, and he said it again now, looking at his 2 children. The dragon must have 3 heads. 3, not 2, 3. This was the ancient Targaryen belief, drawn from their sigil with its 3-headed dragon. 3 conquerors had come to Westeros, Aegon and his 2 sister wives. 3 dragons had burned Harrenhal itself into the ruin it was today. 3 was the sacred number, and Rhaegar believed with absolute conviction that he needed 3 children to fulfill the prophecy. 3 heroes to face the darkness he had read about in those ancient texts. 3 to save the world from the long night's return. Elia had given him 2. Elia could give him no more. The equation was impossible. Or it would have been, for a man less consumed by prophecy, for someone who placed duty above destiny, for a prince who understood that some prices are too high to pay. But Rhaegar was not that man anymore. The prophecy had its hooks in him too deep. He had convinced himself that the fate of the world rested on his shoulders, that only his children, specifically his children, could save humanity from annihilation. That normal rules, normal morality, normal duty did not apply when the stakes were the survival of all mankind. It is a dangerous thing, believing you are the chosen one. It makes you capable of justifying anything. Far to the north, Lyanna Stark returned to Winterfell with her family. Her wedding to Robert Baratheon was being planned. The date was being set. Soon she would travel south to the Stormlands and become Lady of Storm's End, wife to the most powerful young lord in Westeros. She did not want to go. Her conversations with Ned revealed this. She had expressed her doubts about Robert. She knew his nature. She understood that marriage to him meant a life of quiet humiliation, pretending not to notice his bastards and his affairs, being the proper wife while he satisfied his appetites elsewhere. It was the fate of many noble women, this polite fiction, but Lyanna was not most noble women. She was the she-wolf. She had ridden as the Knight of the Laughing Tree. She had defended Howland Reed when knights mocked him. She spoke her mind and rode like the wind, and had no patience for the cages society built for women. And Robert Baratheon, for all his strength and charm, was exactly the kind of cage she feared. But what choice did she have? Marriages were arranged by fathers and lords. not by the women being married. Her feelings were irrelevant. The alliance between Stark and Baratheon mattered. The political advantage mattered. She was a piece on the board, and the game was already in motion. Unless something changed, unless someone offered another option. The question that haunts everything is this: did Rhaegar and Lyanna communicate after Harrenhal? Were there letters, secret meetings? How exactly did what came next come to pass? The evidence suggests planning, coordination. This was not entirely spontaneous, not completely impulsive. Someone had to arrange things. Messages had to be sent. Decisions had to be made. Did Rhaegar tell Lyanna about the prophecy? Did he explain that he needed a third child to save the world? Did he paint himself as a tragic figure, trapped in a loveless political marriage, burdened with knowledge no one else could understand? Did he seduce her with destiny itself? Or was it simpler than that? Was it just two people who felt something genuine, a connection that neither expected nor sought? The prince who carried the weight of the world and the girl who refused to be caged, finding in each other something they could not find elsewhere. The romantic interpretation says it was love, pure and simple, that they were two souls meant for each other, drawn together despite every obstacle, that prophecy and politics mattered less than what they felt when they looked at each other. The cynical interpretation says Rhaegar needed her for his prophecy and manipulated a teenage girl into believing it was love, that he groomed her, fed her stories about destiny, made her feel special and chosen, all to get what he needed. A third child, the completion of his three-headed dragon. The truth probably lies somewhere between. Humans are complicated. Motivations are rarely pure. Rhaegar likely convinced himself that what he felt was love, that the prophecy and his desire aligned perfectly. Lyanna likely wanted to believe in the romance while also desperately seeking escape from her unwanted marriage. Neither of them thought about the consequences, or if they did, they decided those consequences were acceptable prices for what they wanted. Meanwhile, King Aerys continued his descent into complete madness. The burnings became more frequent. His paranoia reached new heights. He began to suspect everyone, including his own son. The relationship between father and son deteriorated further. Jaime Lannister, forced to stand guard while Aerys abused Queen Rhaella, felt his idealism crumbling. This was not what he had imagined when he joined the Kingsguard. He was supposed to protect the innocent, serve with honor, be one of the great knights from the songs. Instead, he stood watch while a mad king raped his own wife and burned men alive for his entertainment. Jaime looked to Rhaegar for guidance, for some sign that things would change, and Rhaegar seemed distant, distracted, his mind elsewhere, not on the kingdom falling apart, not on his father's atrocities, somewhere else entirely. The realm was a powder keg. Everyone could feel it. The mad king on the throne, the perfect prince seemingly unable or unwilling to act, old alliances fraying, new tensions building. All it needed was a spark. And that spark was about to come, because whatever communications had passed between Rhaegar and Lyanna, whatever plans had been made, they were about to be executed. A choice was about to be made that would ignite the realm. Rhaegar spent more time at Dragonstone, away from his father's court, away from his wife and children, preparing for something, gathering certain companions, Arthur Dayne certainly, possibly others. Lyanna traveled the roads near Harrenhal with a small escort, heading back toward Winterfell, away from King's Landing, away from Storm's End. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the perfect prince was about to make the choice that would destroy everything he had ever claimed to care about. In his mind, he was saving the world. In reality, he was about to burn it down. Late in the year 282, Lyanna Stark disappeared. She was traveling near Harrenhal with a small escort, making her way back toward Winterfell, and then Rhaegar Targaryen appeared with companions, and Lyanna vanished with them. The escort returned to Winterfell with the news. The Stark message spread quickly. Prince Rhaegar had taken Lord Rickard's daughter. She was gone. What actually happened in that moment has been debated for over 15 years. Two versions of events exist, and the truth died with everyone who was present. The first version, the one Robert Baratheon believed for the rest of his life, was simple. Rhaegar Targaryen kidnapped Lyanna Stark. He took her by force, against her will, and held her prisoner. It was an act of violence, of criminal abduction. Everything that followed was Rhaegar's fault, the monstrous act of a man who took what he wanted regardless of honor or law. The second version is more complicated. This version suggests Lyanna went willingly, that she chose to leave with Rhaegar, that she ran from her unwanted marriage to Robert and toward someone she actually wanted, that it was elopement, not kidnapping, a choice, not a crime. The evidence for this second version is substantial. Lyanna was known for her fierce spirit. She was the Knight of the Laughing Tree who had defeated 3 knights to defend Howland Reed's honor. This was not a woman who submitted to things quietly. If Rhaegar had tried to take her by force, would she not have fought? Would there not have been signs of struggle? Would her escort not have reported violence? But they reported only that she left with the prince, as if she had gone willingly, as if she had chosen this. Lyanna had told Ned she did not want to marry Robert. She knew what that life would be. She wanted something different, and suddenly, here was the crown prince, the perfect prince, the man who had crowned her queen of love and beauty, offering another path. Did she love him? Had she fallen for him at Harrenhal? Had his letters, if he sent them, convinced her that this was destiny, that they were meant to be together, that he needed her for something larger than either of them? Or was she simply 15 years old, desperate to escape an unwanted marriage, and too young to understand the consequences of running away with a married prince? Here is where it gets darker, because even if Lyanna went willingly, that does not make it right. She was 15 or 16 years old. Rhaegar was a grown man, married with children. The power imbalance was enormous. Prince versus girl, man versus child. Really, even if she believed she was making a free choice, was it truly free, or was she manipulated, groomed, fed stories about prophecy and destiny, until she believed she had to do this? Could someone that young truly consent when the person asking was someone that powerful, that charismatic, that skilled at making people believe in him? The uncomfortable answer is probably not. Even in the most charitable interpretation, where Rhaegar genuinely cared for her and she genuinely wanted to go, the situation was inherently exploitative. He should have known better. He was the adult. He was the prince. He had responsibilities, duties, a wife, children who needed him. But responsibility and duty meant nothing compared to the prophecy, compared to his belief that he needed a third child to save the world, compared to his certainty that he alone understood the stakes. Rhaegar took Lyanna to Dorne, to a place called the Tower of Joy. It was a remote location in the Red Mountains, far from any major roads or settlements. A place where 2 people could hide from the world, where secrets could be kept. And he brought with him 3 of the finest knights in Westeros. Arthur Dayne, his best friend, the Sword of the Morning, wielder of the legendary blade, Dawn. Oswell Went, deadly and loyal. And Gerald Hightower, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard himself, the White Bull, the man who had served 3 kings. 3 of the 7 Kingsguard. 3 of the absolute best. Not in King's Landing protecting the king, not protecting Princess Elia and her children. Here, at this remote tower with Rhaegar and Lyanna. Their presence tells us something important. The Kingsguard do not act without orders. They do not abandon their posts on whims. Rhaegar must have commanded them to come. must have explained why. And they must have believed his reasons were sufficient to justify abandoning their other duties. Did he tell them about the prophecy? Did Arthur Dane, his closest friend, know that Rhaegar believed the fate of the world rested on this? Did they believe it too? Or did they simply follow their prince because he commanded it? While Rhaegar and Lyanna hid in Dorne, news of her disappearance reached her family. Brandon Stark, Lyanna's eldest brother, received word at Riverrun. He was there preparing for his own wedding to Catelyn Tully, a marriage that would bind the Riverlands to the north. He was in high spirits, celebrating, surrounded by friends and allies. Then a rider arrived with the message, "Rhaegar Targaryen has taken your sister." What happened next was pure Brandon Stark. No thought, no plan, no consideration of consequences, just immediate explosive rage. He gathered companions, Jeffrey Mallister, Kyle Royce, Albert Arryn, Ethan Glover, young men all of them, hot-blooded and furious, and Brandon led them on a ride straight to King's Landing. They arrived at the gates of the Red Keep, and Brandon Stark, heir to Winterfell, shouted for all to hear, "Come out and die, Rhaegar." It was a challenge, a direct threat against the Crown Prince. Spoken publicly, at the gates of the king's own castle. In any other circumstance, it might have been overlooked, excused as the rash words of a young man defending his sister's honor. But King Aerys was not any other king, and these were not any other circumstances. Aerys had Brandon and his companions arrested immediately. The charge was treason, threatening the life of the heir to the throne. There could be no forgiveness, no mercy, no understanding that this was a brother defending his sister. Then Aerys sent ravens to Lord Rhaegar Stark in the north, to John Royce in the Vale, to the fathers of all the young men Brandon had brought with him. The message was simple. Your sons have committed treason. Come to King's Landing to answer for their crimes. It was a trap. Everyone should have seen it. But these were honorable men, lords who believed in law and justice. Their sons had been arrested. They had to come. They had to try to make this right. And Rhaegar, the prince whose actions had caused all of this, was nowhere to be found. He was at the Tower of Joy with Lyanna, silent, absent, offering no explanations, no mediations, no attempts to prevent the disaster he had set in motion. He had taken the girl and vanished, left his father to deal with the consequences, left Brandon Stark to rot in the dungeons, left everything to spiral out of control. Either he did not know what his father would do, which makes him criminally negligent, or he did know and did not care, which makes him complicit in what came next. Because what came next was an atrocity, the kind of monstrous act that would ignite rebellion across the entire Seven Kingdoms. Lord Rhaegar Stark traveled south with 200 men. He came to answer for his son, to negotiate, to seek justice for his daughter. He believed in law, in the system, in the idea that grievances could be resolved through proper channels. He walked directly into hell. And while he rode toward King's Landing, while he brought his men south believing he could save his son and find his daughter, Rhaegar remained hidden, stayed silent, did nothing. The perfect prince, the realm's hope, was about to let everything burn, because prophecy mattered more than duty, because his desire for a third child mattered more than preventing war, because he had convinced himself that the ends justified any means, any cost, any amount of suffering. He was wrong, but by the time he realized it, if he ever did, it would be far too late. The powder keg was lit, the realm was about to explode, and the man responsible was hiding in a tower with a teenage girl, believing he was saving the world while actually destroying it. Lord Rhaegar Stark arrived at King's Landing in the year 282, bringing 200 northern men and the weight of his considerable honor. He came as any father would, believing that reason and law still meant something, that even a mad king would recognize justice when confronted with it, that his son's rash words, spoken in defense of a sister's honor, could be forgiven or at least understood. Aerys had other plans. The Mad King called for a trial by combat. This was within his rights as sovereign. When accused of treason, a man could demand combat to prove his innocence. Rhaegar Stark agreed, perhaps hoping this would be the path to resolution. He named his champion. Aerys named his Haze. They suspended Lord Rhaegar Stark in his armor above a massive blaze. Wildfire, that terrible green substance that burns hotter than normal flame, was used to feed the inferno. The heat inside that armor must have been unimaginable. Rhaegar cooked alive inside his own steel shell, roasting slowly as the metal conducted the killing heat directly into his flesh. But that was not the worst of it. They brought Brandon out, put a leather cord around his neck attached to a strangulation device, placed a sword just out of his reach, close enough to see, close enough to almost touch. The mechanism was simple and horrific. When Brandon moved toward the sword, trying to reach it, trying to free himself so he could save his father, the cord tightened around his throat. Brandon Stark strangled himself to death trying to save his father, watching the man who gave him life burn alive. His desperate attempts to reach the sword, to do something, anything, only hastened his own death. The more he fought, the tighter the cord became. Both men died in agony, father and son, lord and heir, murdered by a king who called it justice. The other young men who had ridden with Brandon met similar fates, Lord Royce and his son, the others, all killed, all destroyed by Aerys' cruelty, masquerading as law. Jaime Lannister stood guard during some of these executions. He was 15 years old. He had joined the Kingsguard to serve with honor, to be like the heroes from the songs. Instead, he watched innocent men burn and choke while his king laughed. The white cloak he wore felt heavier with each scream. The vows he had taken felt more like chains. When word spread of what Aerys had done, the realm reacted with appropriate horror. This was not justice. This was butchery. This was a king so far gone into madness that he could not distinguish between law and murder. But Aerys was not finished. He sent ravens to Jon Arryn, Warden of the East, the man who had fostered both Eddard Stark and Robert Baratheon as wards. The message was simple and damning. Send me the heads of Eddard Stark and Robert Baratheon. Execute them, and send me proof. Jon Arryn was an old man, wise enough to understand what this meant. Aerys had murdered Rickard and Brandon Stark for the crime of speaking rashly. Now he wanted Ned Stark dead for no crime at all, simply for being a Stark, and Robert dead for being betrothed to Lyanna, as if that somehow made him complicit in her disappearance. This was not about justice or law, or even about Lyanna anymore. This was a mad king lashing out, seeking to destroy anyone connected to the situation. Aerys wanted blood, and he would not stop until he had it. Jon Arryn made his choice. He called his banners. He raised the veil in rebellion against the Iron Throne. Robert Baratheon called the Lords of the Stormlands to war. His betrothed was gone, taken by Rhaegar. His best friend's father and brother had been murdered. Every fiber of his being demanded vengeance. He was a man built for war, and now war had found him. Eddard Stark rode north to Winterfell. He was Lord of Winterfell now. Through tragedy and murder, his father and brother were dead. His sister was missing, and he had a realm to rally. The North would march. The North would have justice. Hoster Tully, Lord of Riverrun, made a careful calculation. He had 2 daughters of marriageable age. Castan had been meant for Brandon Stark. Lysa was still unbetrothed. Hoster offered both in marriage. Castan would marry Ned Stark, binding the Riverlands to the north. Lysa would marry Jon Arryn, binding the Riverlands to the Vale. Political marriages to cement a military alliance. The rebel alliance formed. North, Vale, Stormlands, Riverlands. 4 of the 7 kingdoms stood against the Iron Throne. Against them stood the Crownlands, naturally loyal to the king. Dorne, because Princess Elia was Rhaegar's wife and her children were in King's Landing. The Reach, with House Tyrell cautiously supporting the crown, and scattered other houses that remained loyal, either from conviction or calculation. The realm split, families divided. Brother fought brother in some cases, each believing they were on the side of justice. And where was Rhaegar through all of this? At the Tower of Joy, in Dorne, with Lyanna Stark, while his father murdered innocent lords, while the kingdom erupted into civil war, while thousands of men gathered their weapons and prepared to kill each other, while his wife Elia and his children Rhaenys and baby Aegon remained in King's Landing, effectively hostages to ensure Dorne's loyalty. He was absent, silent, hidden. The damning question that echoes through history is simple. Why? Why did he not return immediately when Brandon Stark was arrested? Why did he not intervene when his father planned those executions? Why did he not explain himself, negotiate, attempt any form of mediation? Even if he believed the prophecy required him to have a 3rd child with Lyanna, even if he thought he was saving the world, surely he understood that the world he was trying to save was currently tearing itself apart because of his actions. Or did he simply not care? Did prophecy matter so much that present reality became irrelevant? Was he so convinced of his own righteousness that the suffering of thousands meant nothing compared to his mystical destiny? There is no good answer. Either Rhaegar was criminally negligent, so obsessed with his prophecy that he ignored the catastrophe he had caused, or he was actively malicious, willing to let the realm burn if it meant fulfilling what he believed was his destiny. Neither interpretation paints him as the hero he believed himself to be. At the Tower of Joy, Lyanna was pregnant. The 3rd child Rhaegar needed for his 3-headed dragon was growing inside her. Whether she understood the full implications of what was happening outside their refuge, whether Rhaegar told her about the war, whether she wanted to send word to her family, we do not know. The 3 Kingsguard remained at their posts. Arthur Dayne, Oswell Wend, Gerald Hightower, the best knights in Westeros, standing guard at a remote tower while the kingdom collapsed. Their presence there reveals something crucial. They were not protecting the king. Harys was in King's Landing with other Kingsguard. They were not protecting the king. Rhaegar was with them, yes, but he could have been with his army, or at court. They were not protecting Princess Elia or her children, who were in far more danger than anyone else. They were protecting something else, or someone else. The baby that Lyanna carried, the child that had not yet been born, but whose existence apparently justified abandoning every other duty. Why would 3 legendary knights agree to this? What did Rhaegar tell them that convinced them to forsake their vows to protect the royal family in favor of guarding a pregnant girl in a tower? The only explanation that makes sense is that Rhaegar convinced them this child was more important than anything else, that the prophecy was real, that the long night was coming, that this baby would be one of the 3 heroes needed to save humanity from annihilation. They believed him, they trusted him, and they stayed at their posts while the kingdom bled. Back in the warring kingdoms, the fighting began in earnest. The Battle of Summerhall, bitter irony, the place where Rhaegar had been born. Men died on ground that had already seen Targaryen tragedy. Robert Baratheon fought like a man possessed. He cut through loyalist forces with his massive warhammer, crushing skulls and shattering shields. Every blow was for Lyanna. Every kill was vengeance for what Rhaegar had done. But Robert lost the Battle of Ashford. Randyll Tarly, one of the finest military commanders in Westeros, defeated him soundly. Robert was wounded and had to retreat to regroup. The war raged across the realm. Thousands died. Families were destroyed. Castles burned. Fields were trampled. The small folk, as always, suffered most. They had not started this war. They had no stake in whether Rhaegar or Robert won, but they died anyway, caught between armies, their crops destroyed, their villages razed. All because a prince took a girl and refused to explain himself. In King's Landing, Princess Elia lived in a nightmare. Her husband had abandoned her publicly, humiliated her at Harrenhal, then run off with another woman. Now she and her children were trapped in the capital with a mad king who kept them as insurance. Aerys made it clear, as long as I have them, Dorne must fight for me. Elia's brother, Prince Oberyn Martell, was furious. The insult to his sister demanded blood, but Dorne was bound by politics and hostages. They could not simply withdraw support without condemning Elia and her children to death. Little Rhaenys, only 3 years old, did not understand why her father was gone. Why her mother cried sometimes when she thought no one was watching. Why the castle felt tense and afraid. Baby Aegon, born into this chaos, knew nothing but his mother's arms and the ever-present tension of the Red Keep. These were Rhaegar's children, the first 2 heads of his prophesied dragon, and he had left them unprotected, left them as pawns in his mad father's game, prioritized the unborn 3rd child over the 2 who already existed. How does a father do that? How does a man who claims to be saving the world justify abandoning his own children to a mad king's mercy? The uncomfortable truth is that Rhaegar had convinced himself that some children mattered more than others, that his prophesied 3 were special, chosen, more important than other lives, that included his existing children, apparently. Rhaedys and Aegon were just the first 2 parts of the prophecy. Useful but not complete, not as important as the 3rd child, the one that would unite ice and fire. It is a monstrous way to think about your own children, but prophecy does monstrous things to people. It makes them believe that the ends justify any means, that destiny overrides morality, that being chosen by fate means you can ignore the suffering you cause. Rhaegar believed he was the hero of the story. He was wrong. He was the catalyst for tragedy, the spark that ignited a war that would kill tens of thousands. He was not the dragon prince saving the world. He was the prince who burned it down while chasing visions and prophecies. And he still had not emerged from hiding, still had not explained himself, still had not done anything to stop the catastrophe his choices had unleashed. The realm burned, the perfect prince hid, and history was being written in blood while he remained silent. Rhaegar Targaryen finally emerged from his exile in early 283. After nearly a year of absence, he left the Tower of Joy, left Lyanna pregnant and under guard, and returned to take command of the Loyalist forces. By then, it was far too late. The damage was irreversible. Trust was shattered. Thousands were already dead. The Rebel Alliance had momentum and righteous fury on their side. They were not fighting for political advantage or territorial gain. They were fighting because Aerys had murdered innocent men, and because Rhaegar had taken a girl and started a war. When Rhaegar appeared, those who saw him reported that he seemed different, changed. The melancholy that had always haunted him was deeper now, more profound. Some said he looked resigned, as if he had accepted something terrible. Others said he appeared determined, focused on the task ahead. A few claimed his eyes held a kind of sad certainty, as if he knew how this would end but had to play his part anyway. Did he see his own death in his prophecies? Had he read something in those ancient texts that told him he would not survive this war? Is that why he had spent so long at the Tower of Joy, because he knew those were his last peaceful days? Or was he simply overwhelmed by the magnitude of what his choices had wrought? Did he finally understand that his pursuit of prophecy had destroyed the very realm he claimed to be saving? One of the few recorded conversations from this period comes from Jaime Lannister. Before Rhaegar left to join his army, he spoke with the young Kingsguard. The conversation was brief but telling. Rhaegar told Jaime that when this was over, when the war was won, he intended to call a council. Changes would be made. The implication was clear. Aerys would be dealt with. The Mad King's reign would end one way or another. Rhaegar would take the throne and try to fix what his father had broken. It was a reasonable plan. Too reasonable, perhaps, and far too late. But it shows that Rhaegar was not completely blind to reality. He understood that his father was the problem. He intended to solve it. But first, he had to win the war, and winning the war created its own terrible paradox. If Rhaegar won, the rebellion would be crushed, Robert Baratheon would be executed, Ned Stark would likely die as well, and Lyanna, she would be discovered. The truth about her would come out, that she had been with Rhaegar willingly or unwillingly, that she was carrying his child. Robert's allies would demand her death. The child's death. No Targaryen heir could be allowed to survive if they represented the union that had started this war. Winning meant saving the dynasty, but likely dooming Lyanna and the baby, the very people he had risked everything for. Losing meant the dynasty would fall. Aerys would be overthrown. Rhaegar himself would die. But perhaps Ned Stark, when he found his sister, might protect her, might save the child, might understand that a baby was innocent regardless of whose blood it carried. Did Rhaegar think through this paradox? Did he realize that his best chance of saving the child he believed would save the world was to lose the war and die? We will never know. But there is one strange detail that suggests something. Rhaegar left his harp at the Tower of Joy. The instrument he loved, the one he played to make women weep, the symbol of his artistic soul. He left it behind. Did he ever intend to return? Or did he know he was riding to his death? Rhaegar gathered the loyalist forces and marched to meet Robert's army. Many lords were already dead or defeated. The loyalist cause was weakened, but Rhaegar's presence rallied those who remained. Some believed in the Targaryen dynasty. Others were simply bound by oaths and honor. A few still believed that Rhaegar would somehow make everything right. The march toward the Trident was a somber affair. This was not an army full of confidence and certainty. This was a desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. Every man knew the stakes. Defeat meant the end of nearly 300 years of Targaryen rule. Victory meant trying to rebuild a kingdom that had torn itself apart. On the other side, Robert Baratheon led the rebel army with single-minded purpose. He had one goal: find Rhaegar Targaryen and kill him. Every battle, every skirmish, every strategic decision led toward that confrontation. Robert was not interested in tactics or political maneuvering. He wanted to put his warhammer through the skull of the man who had taken Lyanna. Ned Stark marched beside his friend. Though his motivations were more complex, he wanted justice for his father and brother. He wanted to overthrow the Mad King, but he also desperately wanted to find his sister, to save her if she could be saved. Robert's burning hatred for Rhaegar must have troubled Ned, because Ned understood that Lyanna's fate was tied to Rhaegar's. Whatever the truth of what happened between them, Lyanna would need mercy and understanding when she was found. The two armies converged on the Trident, the green fork of the great river, at a place that would forever after be known by a different name, the Ruby Ford. The battle was inevitable. Too much blood had been spilled. Too many men had died. Too much hatred had built up. This war could not end through negotiation or compromise. It required a definitive victory, and both sides believed they could achieve it. In the final days before the battle, Rhaegar must have thought about many things. His children in King's Landing, vulnerable and unprotected. His father's madness, and what would happen if the Loyalists won. Lyanna at the Tower of Joy, growing larger with his child, the prophecy that had driven all his choices. The war that his actions had caused, the deaths that weighed on his soul. Did he regret? Did he wish he could go back to that moment at Harrenhal and make a different choice? Place the crown of winter roses in Elia's lap instead of Lyanna's, or better yet, refuse to organize the tournament at all, refuse to pursue whatever had pulled him toward the Stark girl? Or did he still believe, even then, that he had done right? That the prophecy justified everything? That the child Lyanna carried was worth all the blood and suffering? The sources do not tell us. They only tell us that when the day of battle came, Rhaegar Targaryen put on his armor, black plate with rubies across the breastplate, each one worth a fortune. The three-headed dragon of House Targaryen emblazoned in red. He took up his sword, mounted his horse, and rode to meet his destiny. The perfect prince. The warrior, poet. The man who had convinced himself he was saving the world, about to face the man whose life he had destroyed. About to pay the price for all his choices. Across the field, Robert Baratheon saw the black armor with its rubies catching the light. He saw the silver-haired prince who had haunted his nightmares for the past year, and something primal took over. All the rage, all the pain, all the love he felt for Lyanna, transformed into pure fury. The two men were on a collision course, Dragon Prince and Stag Lord, prophecy and vengeance, destiny and rage. One of them would die in the red waters of the Trident. The other would shape the future of Westeros. History was about to be written, and Rhaegar Targaryen, who had spent his life reading about prophecy and destiny, was about to become a part of history himself. A cautionary tale, a tragedy. The prince who meant well and destroyed everything. The battle was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same. The Battle of the Trident in the year 283 was the largest and bloodiest engagement of Robert's rebellion. Two massive armies, each numbering somewhere around 40,000 men, collided at the crossing point of the Green Fork. The fate of the Seven Kingdoms hung in the balance. The morning began with the sound of horns and drums. Banners snapped in the wind. The three-headed dragon of House Targaryen faced the crowned stag of House Baratheon, the dire wolf of House Stark, the falcon of House Arryn, the leaping trout of House Tully, red and black against a rainbow of rebel colors. The commanders on both sides knew this battle would be decisive. Whoever controlled the Trident controlled the path to King's Landing. Whoever won here would likely win the war. There would be no retreat, no second chances. Everything came down to this day, this place, this battle. The armies crashed together, with the sound of thousands of men dying. Steel on steel, screams of rage and pain, the chaos of medieval warfare, where formations dissolved into individual struggles for survival. Knights on horseback carved through infantry. Archers sent volleys of arrows into packed formations. Men slipped in blood and mud, were trampled by horses, died without ever seeing who killed them. It was hell. The kind of battle where tactics matter less than endurance, where the side that can keep fighting longest, that maintains morale when everything is screaming at them to flee, that side wins. Robert Baratheon fought like something from legend that day. He was already a powerful man, but rage transformed him into something more. His warhammer, the massive weapon that would become his symbol, crushed through armor and bone. He did not fight with technique or finesse. He fought with overwhelming force, battering his way through the loyalist lines like a force of nature. Every swing of that hammer was for Lyanna. Every crushed skull was vengeance. Every shattered shield was justice as Robert understood it. He was not a king yet, not a politician, not a strategist. He was simply a man who had lost the woman he loved, and he would make someone pay. The loyalist soldiers tried to stop him. They formed walls of spears, sent their best knights to challenge him. Nothing worked. Robert smashed through everything in his path. Men fell before him. His armor became drenched in blood, most of it not his own. He was wounded multiple times, but he did not stop, could not stop, would not stop until he found the man he was hunting. Rhaegar Targaryen fought on the loyalist side, commanding forces, trying to turn the tide of battle. He was skilled, methodical, everything his training had made him. But this was not a tournament. This was war at its most brutal, and skill alone could not overcome the fury driving the rebel forces. The battle raged for hours. The sun climbed higher in the sky. The Trident ran red with blood long before the famous moment that would give the ford its name. Thousands of men died that day, their names forgotten, their bodies buried in mass graves or simply left to rot. This was the cost of the war Rhaegar had started. These men, common soldiers mostly, had no stake in whether a prince loved a woman or honored his wife. They died because lords made decisions, and common men paid the price. In the midst of the chaos, Robert and Rhaegar finally met. The exact details are lost to history, transformed by witnesses into myth and legend, but the broad strokes are clear. The two men who had started this war through their connection to Lyanna Stark found each other in the ford itself, in the waist-deep water where the armies were locked in struggle. Rhaegar wore his black armor with the rubies gleaming across his chest, the three-headed dragon, the symbol of everything Robert was fighting to destroy. Robert wore his armor with the crowned stag, the symbol of his house and his claim. They fought in the water. Steel clashed. The sounds of their personal combat were drowned out by the larger battle around them, but those close enough to see said it was brutal. Rhaegar with his sword, quick and precise. Robert with his warhammer, powerful and relentless. Rhaegar was skilled. He had trained for years, won tournaments, proven himself a capable warrior. But Robert Baratheon, in the grip of fury, was beyond skill. He fought with the kind of strength that comes from absolute conviction, from rage so pure it transcended technique. The fight could not have lasted long, though it must have felt eternal to both men. Every exchange of blows carried the weight of the entire war. Rhaegar fighting for his dynasty, his family, his belief that he was fulfilling destiny. Robert fighting for his lost love, his murdered friends, his desire for vengeance. Robert's warhammer found its mark. The blow caught Rhaegar square in the chest. The sound of the impact, the crunch of metal giving way, the crack of bone, it must have been sickening. The rubies on Rhaegar's breastplate exploded from the force. They scattered into the water, gemstones worth fortunes tumbling into the red current like drops of dragon blood. Rhaegar Targaryen fell. The Dragon Prince, the perfect heir, the man who believed he was saving the world, dropped into the churning water of the Trident. His silver hair spread around him like a halo. The water was already red with blood from the battle, but now it took the blood of a prince. He died there in the river, with Robert Baratheon standing over him. No last words are recorded. No final message or confession. If Rhaegar said anything, it was lost in the noise of battle. He simply died, and with him died whatever secrets he had kept, whatever truths he could have revealed about Lyanna, about the prophecy, about why he had made the choices that destroyed his family. The loyalist forces saw their prince fall, morale shattered. The dragon was dead, without Rhaegar, without the symbol of Targaryen power and legitimacy. What were they fighting for? A mad king everyone hated, a dynasty that had already lost its best hope. The loyalist army began to break. Some fled, some surrendered, some fought to the death out of stubborn loyalty or simple desperation. But the battle was over. The war was essentially over. The Targaryens had lost. Robert stood in the red water, his warhammer dripping with blood and river water. Around him, men were dying, drowning, surrendering. But Robert looked only at the body of Rhaegar Targaryen, the man he had hunted, the man he had hated more than anyone in the world. Did he feel satisfaction, victory, or just emptiness? Killing Rhaegar would not bring Lyanna back, would not undo the past year of horror, would not restore his friend's father and brother to life. Ned Stark fought his way to Robert's side. He saw his best friend standing over Rhaegar's corpse, saw the rubies in the water, gleaming beneath the surface, saw the end of the Targaryen dynasty playing out before his eyes. Ned felt no triumph. He had avenged his father and brother. Yes, but he also knew his sister was still missing, still in danger, and the man who might have told them where she was, what had happened, whether she was alive or dead, that man was now beyond questioning. The battle ended with thousands dead on both sides. The Trident earned its new name, Ruby Ford, for the gemstones that could be found in the riverbed for years after. People would dive for them, fishing out pieces of Rhaegar's armor, claiming chunks of history transformed into wealth. But the rubies were not the important thing Rhaegar left in that river. He left the truth there. The explanation for his choices, the full story of what had happened with Lyanna, his reasons, his motivations, his understanding of the prophecy that had driven everything. All of it died with him in the red water. What died at the Trident was more than just a man. It was the image of the perfect prince, the hope that Rhaegar would somehow fix everything, that he would be the good king the realm needed. That hope drowned along with its bearer. Also dead was any chance of peaceful resolution. With Rhaegar gone, there was no one to negotiate with, no reasonable Targaryen to broker terms. Only Mad King Aerys remained, and he would never surrender, never compromise, never do anything but burn and destroy. The prophecy that Rhaegar believed in so deeply, the three heads of the dragon, the heroes who would save the world from darkness, it was incomplete now. The father was dead. The first two children, Rhaenys and Aegon, were in King's Landing at the mercy of a mad king and the approaching rebel army. The third child was unborn, hidden, unknown. If Rhaegar was right about the prophecy, if the Long Night truly was returning and only his children could stop it, then his death at the Trident was the worst possible outcome. He had abandoned everything, betrayed everyone, started a war, all to father this prophesied third child. And now he would never see that child born, would never teach them what they needed to know, would never prepare them for their supposed destiny. He had gambled everything on prophecy and lost. Or perhaps, in some twisted way, this was how it had to be. Perhaps the prophecy required his death, required the child to grow up, not knowing their father, not burdened by expectations of destiny. Perhaps Rhaegar had read that in his texts too, and accepted it. We will never know. The man who could have explained everything was face down in a river with a caved-in chest and rubies scattered around him. Robert Baratheon had won, but the war was not quite over. King's Landing still held. Amressis still sat the Iron Throne, and somewhere in a tower in Dawn, Lyanna Stark waited, pregnant and guarded, unaware that the father of her child had just been killed. The pieces were in motion for the final tragedies, the sack of King's Landing, the murder of children, the lies that would shape the next 15 years, the secret that would drive the Game of Thrones itself. But in that moment, in the aftermath of the Battle of the Trident, all anyone knew was that the Dragon Prince was dead. His rubies lay in the water. His dreams of prophecy and destiny had been shattered by a warhammer, and the realm would never be the same. After the Trident, the rebel armies marched on King's Landing, Tywin Lannister finally chose his side, arriving with his army claiming to defend Aerys. The desperate king opened the gates. It was a trap. Lannister forces sacked the city for 3 days. Tywin sent his most brutal killers after the remaining Targaryens. Gregor Clegane and Amory Lorch found Princess Elia with her children in Maga's holdfast. They dragged 3-year-old Rhaenys from under her bed and stabbed her over 50 times. They took baby Aegon and smashed his head against a wall. Then Gregor raped and murdered Elia. Tywin wrapped the bodies in Lannister cloaks and presented them to Robert as gifts. Robert approved. Ned Stark was horrified. Their friendship cracked that day and never fully healed. Meanwhile, Jaime Lannister killed King Aerys to prevent him from burning the entire city with wildfire. When Ned arrived, he found Jaime sitting on the Iron Throne with the Mad King's blood on his sword. The image haunted them both forever. The war was over, but Ned had one more task. He rode south with 6 companions to find Lyanna, following rumors to a remote tower in Dorne. At the Tower of Joy, 3 Kingsguard stood guard: Arthur Dayne, Oswell Went, and Geralt Hightower, the best knights in Westeros, defending a tower while their king died and their dynasty fell. Ned asked why they had not been at the crucial battles. They said their vows kept them here. When Ned said the war was over, Arthur Dayne replied, "The Kingsguard does not flee." 7 fought 3. Only Ned and Howland Reed survived. All 3 legendary Kingsguard died in that dusty courtyard, never explaining why they stayed. Ned climbed the stairs and found Lyanna in a bed of blood. She had given birth to a son, but was dying. In her final moments, she made Ned promise something. "Promise me, Ned." She died in his arms. The baby survived. Dark-haired, gray-eyed, Rhaegar's son, the 3rd child of prophecy. Ned understood immediately. If Robert learned of this child's existence, he would order him killed. The baby was innocent but carried Targaryen blood. Ned claimed the child as his own bastard. Let everyone believe he had dishonored himself during the war. Named him Jon Snow. Raised him at Winterfell alongside his legitimate children, letting his wife resent him for a betrayal that never happened. Jon was actually Lyanna's son, Rhaegar's son, Rhaegar's son. Possibly legitimate if they married, a true heir to the Iron Throne. The prince that was promised, the song of ice and fire made flesh. The 3 Kingsguard had died protecting this baby because his claim was stronger than anyone's. The dad kept the secret for 15 years, raised his nephew as his bastard son. Let Jon grow up believing he was shameful, all to keep a promise to a dying sister. Rhaegar's prophecy fulfilled in the worst way. 2 children murdered as babies, one surviving hidden and ignorant. The father dead before any could be prepared for their destiny. If the long night truly would return, Rhaegar had ensured his plan would fail by destroying everything in pursuit of it. Rhaegar died at 24, never king, never explained. History remembers him through fractured perspectives. Robert hated him until death. Saw only a kidnapper and rapist. Ruled for 15 years. But never stopped raging about Rhaegar, called out Lyanna's name on his wedding night to Cersei. His obsession poisoned everything. Ned never spoke ill of Rhaegar, but never defended him either. His silence was answer enough. The situation was more complicated than Robert could understand. Barristan Selmy said it best. Rhaegar fought valiantly, fought nobly, fought honorably, and Rhaegar died. A good man who made catastrophic choices. Cersei remained bitter. She never married him. Jaime worshipped him until disillusionment set in. Daenerys heard only that he was perfect. Jon Connington loved him and spent his life seeking redemption for failing him. 3 interpretations exist. The romantic view sees tragic love. two souls meant for each other destroyed by circumstance. The villain view sees a selfish prince who groomed a girl and hid while thousands died. The tragic believer view sees someone consumed by prophecy, convinced he was saving the world while actually destroying it. The truth likely mixes all three. Rhaegar convinced himself that prophecy and desire aligned, that wanting Lyanna and needing her for destiny were the same, that the ends justified any means. The questions haunt history. Did he truly love Lyanna, or just need her for prophecy? Did she love him, or was she too young to truly consent to a prince's manipulation? Did he legally marry her, making Jon legitimate? What exactly did prophecy tell him? Did he see his own death coming? No answers exist, only consequences. His choices killed tens of thousands, ended the Targaryen dynasty, put Robert on a throne he was unsuited for, created the fractured realm that would explode again in the War of Five Kings, orphaned Daenerys, who grew up in exile, created Jon Snow, who became central to the fight against the White Walkers. The irony cuts deep. Rhaegar obsessed over saving the world from darkness. His actions brought immediate darkness instead. But the long night did return. Jon did fight the dead. The prophecy maybe was real all along. Was it worth it? Thousands dead so one child could be born in secret. Two children murdered so a third could survive hidden. A dynasty destroyed so prophecy could unfold. Rhaegar believed he was the hero. He was wrong. He was the catalyst for tragedy. Not the dragon prince saving the world, but the prince who burned it down chasing visions. The lesson is clear. Good intentions mean nothing without wisdom. Prophecy is a dangerous master. Love without responsibility destroys. Believing you are chosen by fate does not make you right. Rhaegar Targaryen was the perfect prince who destroyed perfection, wanted to save the world, cost thousands of lives. The man whose choices shaped everything in Game of Thrones. His story a warning about destiny, duty, and the road to hell paved with prophecy. The dragon lies dead in the Trident, his rubies scattered, his harp silent, his children murdered, hidden, or exiled, his kingdom ashes, his truth unknown forever. But his song, Ice and Fire, echoes still. In Jon Snow, who never wanted destiny, but carried it anyway. In the questions that will never be answered. In the reminder that even perfect princes can be perfectly wrong. So what do you think? Was Rhaegar hero, villain, or tragic fool? Did he love Lyanna or use her? Was prophecy real or excuse? Did Jon's role justify everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you made it this far, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of Westeros. Because some stories never truly end, they just echo through time, asking questions we can never fully answer. The dragon is dead. Long live the song of ice and fire. Promise me you will remember. Promise me